In this video, we'll be talking about the basics of Maya and how to animate with it. So before we get started on actually animating anything, I want to just do a quick overview of the UI that is important to animation. And largely this deals with the bottom part of the Maya, which by default showcases elements such as the range slider, um, the actual frames, and the VCR, what I call the VCR play controls down here. So animation is kind of a trick of illusion on the human brain. How animation works, at least in the most broad sense, is it relies on something called persistence of vision, meaning what we do is if we see enough images that are still and they're shown to us in rapid concession, our mind fills in the blanks and makes animation. You ever seen those like little, wheels that you spin? It has a little horse running inside it. They're just a bunch of still images. You move them fast enough, the horse looks like it's running. And this is the foundation of 2D animation. And despite what you might think of 3D, it's actually the same result. 3D, you might be making the initial models and the animation in 3D, but it actually renders back out to 2D, just like good old-fashioned animation, and relies on the human brain's persistent vision, pretty much as all television and film media does, to show you the renders and the animations. So this brings us to a key point in most animation packages, and it's called frame rate. At a certain point, it breaks down and just becomes like a slideshow. But we have to have a certain amount of frames per second to sell that persistence of a vision and see an animation. By default, Maya's animation frame rate is 24 frames per second. That is the roots in film. However, that's not the only frame rate, and technically any frame rate will be fine as long as you're over that minimum threshold. Um, Television and a lot of video games are 30 frames per second, but again, it can be anything. So you just got to know what the frame rate is so you know how many numbers to count per second. Now, if you want to change it, you can change it quite easily right here in the bottom right and change to these presets, and you can see, again, by default it was on 24 frames per second. Or you can switch to 30 frames per second, whatever you want. You need to be mindful of what that is. So let's just say I change it to 30 frames per second to make math, in this case, a little easier. Going forward, if I change this to 30 frames per second, you will see a slight shift down here. It's just changing the numbers. So what that means is these are frames. These numbers down here in this slider are frames. This is not 1 second of animation, 2 seconds of animation, 3 seconds of animation. These are frames. So to get a full second of animation, we need 30 frames. So when you start animating, you got to remember that frame rate 1 to 30 is 1 second of animation. Now, that kind of throws a few students off, so just be sure that you remember that. And you just kind of have to start, you get really good at doing math based on whatever your frame rate is. I'm going to make this go for a half a second. I'm going to make this go for a quarter of a second, or whatever the case may be. You're going to start getting divisible by that 30 when you block in your animation, but it's by no means the final animation. Now that's animation in general. Now let's talk about production of animation. Now, how animators worked in the past is they had lead animators that would make out the key frames of animation, and generally junior animators would come around and fill in those animations between those key animation points. So, for example, if you were doing a character jumping, they might do at frame 1, getting ready on the ground, getting ready to jump. At X frame, let's just say 15, just to keep it simple. You're going to have the character shrink down at 30. You're going to have the character start jumping into the air at 35 or 40. You're going to have them at the height of the jump, and whatever the case may be. You're as the lead animator, they would make those key moments, which usually show the extent of a character or an object or something being animated, as oftentimes matching up more closely to the storyboards. And then animators would come in, and that have less experience would come in and start filling in all the gaps between them to help to speed up the production environment. So the concept of keyframes in 3D applications and digital applications in general, you take the role of the lead animator, and Maya will fill in the gaps. But computers aren't people, so they don't generally at a basic. They kind of just they go straight to the point. So everything in animation in 3D is value over time. And you can go in there, of course, edit, and you will do a lot of editing to refine that as you go. But a computer just goes from one point to another. So if I make a keyframe object over here, something over here to the left, and then I move my timeline and make a keyframe object over here, the computer's just going to go straight across. Maybe you wanted to do a curve, and of course we can go edit that. But by default, it just goes straight across. So you have to kind of grasp at those points, and you have to kind of work with the computer. So you have to understand things like the channel box and how the values are changing. Not because you need to know exactly what those values are. You just need to understand that in some cases that this value is going this direction and that corresponds to this direction. So let me go ahead and get started on here and go through after that overview lecture here. And I will come back to the UI as needed at the bottom. So I'm going to do a little exercise of this cube that's going to run around this basically grid. I'm just going to imagine this is a ground plane. So I'm just going to make a polygon primitive cube. I'm going to click in here, create a cube. If you want to make it bigger, you can. I'm just going to make it a generic cube. Let's say 3. That looks pretty good to me. And I'm just going to WYSIWYG, use the translate tool, the W key, and I'm just going to drag it to one corner. And again, it's not really important to know how fast these arrows are moving yet, but you do want a general idea. Again, Z is forward and back, red is left and right, and Y is up and down. So, it doesn't really matter if I start over here or here. It's just being mindful of those values. So I'm just going to stick this in the corner. Like I said, I'm using the arrow keys. We could come in here and type these numbers if we wanted them to be precise. Why not? I'll go ahead and make them precise because my cube is 3 units. Do 1.5y, which will put it right on the thing because I did halfway. And it looks like, and I'm just guessing, that 18 in mine, because I think I've messed with the settings, is the edges here. And that's, I'm incorrect. So it looks like maybe, yeah, it looks like I've recently played with these settings, so it looks like it's 18.5 by 18.5. And yours will probably be a value of 10 or 12, I'm betting, when you guys go to do yours. So I have these values here. I just made them even numbers, just because, why not? And then we can animate this going around, but we have to follow a certain order, or the keyframes won't get made, or they won't get made properly, and they'll cause problems. So this is the biggest hang-up for beginning animators. So I've moved this object around because I haven't started any animation, but here's how you have to animate, and this is how you always have to do it. The first thing you're supposed to do is always set the time. Granted, we're on frame 1, the time was already set for us, so I didn't have to do that step. But you must always, even if you're going to be guessing, you always set the time first. What keyframe where you want the keyframe to be. You most likely will not be accurate. You can change it later, but you're guessing, you're blocking it in. Set the time. Second is alter the object in some way. You can do subcomponent, but for the purpose of this video, I'm going to just focus on object mode based animation, i.e. just moving the object with a translate, scale, and rotate tool. So the second is alter the object in some way. So again, first is always set the time. Second is alter the object. And third is you set a key. If you do not follow that order, what's going to happen is either you're going to have animations get snapped back and you're going to lose some work, or you're going to accidentally start overwriting keyframes. So again, number 1, set time. 2, alter object. 3, set a key. Now, after you follow those 3 steps, you'll be fine. After that, now there's the hard part of learning to animate, right? So I have this cube. I already have the time set at 1. I didn't have to do anything. I moved the cube to a corner. I've altered the object, and now I've set a key. Now there are a lot of ways to set keys. There's also auto keyframing, which I'm not going to even show you how to do in this video because I prefer, until you have experience, that you don't mess with the auto key. But it does exist for those that are curious. You can set keys the quickest with the S key on your keyboard. If you hit the S key and you look at the channel box, and when you have the channel box open, you will see all these turn like red right here, little red squares. That means all those attributes now have a keyframe. And you should see a little red vertical line down here at the bottom. If this red line is not, is confusing where its placement is, it's always slightly to the left of that keyframe. I can make this bigger. Time display. I'll do that later. You can go in. I'll do it now. You can go into this the preferences. I think it's under the preferences. I've forgotten where it is. I don't want to take up the video doing that. So if you go to the preferences, so Windows, setting preferences, and you go to the time slider. This is purely optional. If you want to increase the size of the down here, you can. I'm making it bigger because I think it might help with the video. Oh, that's making this thicker. And then there should be one for also for how tall it is. Let me see, where are you? I'm not too concerned about that. Let me see here. I'm sorry. Well, I'm going to move on because I can't seem to find it in the current settings. Time slider settings. I feel I'm looking at it and I'm just missing it. Here we go. I think it's here under animation. There's just so many settings. All right, I'll make an addendum video for that. As you can see, it is buried in here somewhere. You can make it a little bit thicker here, and you can see you can adjust the frame rate here and stuff as well. But I just don't do that anymore. Save that out, and then what we can do is we can see this keyframe a little bit bigger. But that's not the only way to create a keyframe. The S key is definitely the easiest. It selects everything. I don't recommend the S key personally. I recommend actually using the channel keyframes. So I'm going to undo this. Keep on doing. There we go. So you see it's gone. What I like to use personally is the shift and the corresponding attribute. So again, if you're having a hard time with what I'm about to show you, feel free to use the S key. There's just some disadvantages to it, which I'll cover a little bit later. But if I'm going to move this animation, so I'm going to move this box cube from here to here, I'm going to be doing a translate option. And so what I like to do is I like to do shift and the corresponding key, in this case W, shift W, which will add keyframes just to the translate. So it doesn't change how the keys are made. It just doesn't make any keys to these other attributes, which is cleaner when you go to do the second part of animation when you start cleaning things up. So again, there's nothing wrong with hitting the S key. Just know that you're probably going to have to go in through there and start removing those keyframes. If you shift in the corresponding key, you will make just whatever keys on that channel you want. Now the last way, which I'm not going to do just yet, not the last way, but the last way I'm going to show you, is you can also right click on these attributes or multiple of them and just right click and go key selected. And that's the way I actually do a lot of my work. But for the purposes of speed, I'm going to be doing shift W for this as I go along. All right, so I've set a key, I've altered the object, and great, I've animated. No, I haven't. You need obviously at least 2 keyframes before there's any animation. So again, if I hammer anything in this session is move the timeline first. So I'm going to click on the timeline, 30. And I'm just picking a second. I'm guessing. You can change these values later. I'm going to drag the box. So step 2, manipulate the object in some way. I'm just going to eyeball that. There we go. You can see I'm just going to eyeball from now on instead of typing in numbers. And step 3 is set a key. So again, move the timeline to step 1, alter the object, step 2, set a key. Shift, in this case, I'm going to do Shift W. And I'm going to zoom out a little bit. And now we'll talk with the VCR controls over here to the left. This is rewind animation. This is go back a frame. I'm going back 1 frame at a time. Too slow. This is the, with the orange line here, is the go back by keyframes. This is the play backwards. I'm not going to click it. Play forwards. I'm not going to click it yet. Go forward a keyframe. Go forward 1 frame at a time. Go to the end of the animation settings right here. So I'm just going to rewind it completely, far left one, and hit play. Now I don't know what my current settings are for this. Mine look like it's correct. So I have to go back to the render settings anyway, but mine look correct. Now if you open up a brand new version of Maya, and maybe you've never animated before, most likely your settings aren't going to be set for this way. They're going to be set to what's called play every frame, which is used for simulating particle systems. Mine's already set to what's called real-time preview. So we have to, I'm just going to cover this just in case your Maya looks different. If it's playing really, really fast, that means it's set to play every frame. So what I'm going to do is go back to those render settings, preferences, go back to actually, sorry, this is just straight up on animation. And so we're going to go again, preference, Windows, preference, setting preferences, preferences, click on animation, and you scroll down. It's obviously they've changed their settings recently. Okay, I was incorrect. It's on time slider. Playback speed is play every frame. So mine was set to play every frame. But I also have my current setting set to max playback speed set to 30 times 1. The default is most likely free. So you can do it one of two ways. You can either change the playback speed to match whatever your settings are, what you want. And again, this goes back to that frame rate. So you probably will see something like 30, or 30 or 24 FPS times 1, which means it's going to play real time, or it's going to play half speed, or it's going to play double speed. I leave playback speed, play every frame on, but just make sure the max playback speed is set to, again, 30 FPS times 1.5 times 2. So I use times 1. So you just got to make sure this is not set to free. Make sure it's 30 FPS times 1. That means it will play every frame for simulations, but it will slow everything down to the max speed of this. So it kind of slows everything down. And I think that's the best option because it gives you the best of both worlds. So make sure you change that, and you won't have that problem. Like I said, you most likely have your set to free by default, and I'm pretty sure that saves. Like you'll never have to change that again unless you want to. So you will see when you hit play, it plays the animation. When it gets all the way in, it will automatically re-loop as it goes. Now this brings us to a point, like I have all these dead frames here with nothing to really look at. And that's what this bar above it is for. This is the preview range here. And I'm only rendered 1 to 30 frames, but I'm viewing actually 150 of it. And technically the animation that you don't see it is, according to this, is 250 frames by long right now. I don't really worry about that too much. I cut the animation or extend the animation as I go. It's very fluid about that. But if you wanted to preview less animation for some reason, we can just click on this little box and drag it here, or type a number in this field right here to actually reduce this here as well. So if I come in here and change this to say 60, I'm only previewing 2 seconds of the animation. I hit play. You can see it kind of waits and then starts over again. So if you don't want to wait so long to see the animation being previewed, you can change these numbers. Now, typically how most people work is they will start out very big. So the exact opposite of what I just did. They'll start out very big. And in fact, just for simplicity, I'm going to make this 150. Let's make it 300. I know that's way too long, but I'm going to make this 300 frames, which is 10 seconds of animation. and we've done the first one. So what people will do is then generally they'll zoom out, they'll block in key animations, and then they will go back and they'll start tightening this up more and more and more and more as they refine the animations. And then, you know, maybe take a step back and look at it again from a macro view. So right now, I got this set to large, which is a lot of waiting. 1 second of animation, 9 seconds of nothing. But it's really up to you how you want to do that. So I just stopped the animation. I'm going to come back here. All right, now for some repetition. So I'm going to move this box from here to here. So again, I'm going to do 1 second, and this is going to be very, you know, mechanical. Kind of move it to 60 frames now. Again, always move your time first. Have your time. You're guessing. Have your time where you want it to be. Alter the object. I'm just going to drag the blue arrow, and I'm going to hit Shift W because I'm translating move. So I'm doing keys on Shift W. You can see already that turned dark red because it brings a point. The light red or pink color is something that has animation but not a keyframe. The dark red is something that has a keyframe. So I rewind this and play. We should see immediately it goes across. Now, this brings us to a point of time over value over time. Let's say on this next step, I don't want it to go anywhere for a second. I want it to sit there. And some people would, you know, okay, they would come like, oh, I'm gonna have it sit there. I'm gonna go to frame 90. Oh, then I'm gonna go to 120, and then I'm gonna drag it over and then animate. That's not what's gonna happen. It's not gonna sit there for a second. What's gonna happen is because there's no keyframe there, it's going to take 2 seconds to get over here. So what you need to do is we need to create, and I hear it called different things, but I call it a holding frame. So I'm going to come in here and go to frame 90, and instead of moving it anywhere, I'm not going to do anything to it. So I'm skipping step 2 consciously. So again, I move the time, I alter the object, which I'm not going to alter because I want it to sit there, and then set a key, Shift W. Now I'm going to go ahead and move the time once again to 120, move the object all the way over, and hit Shift W once again. And you can already see this is getting more like procedural already. We're kind of just making it go. I'm going to rewind this and hit play. First second, second second, sits there for a second and goes. I'm going to let it loop one more time. We'll wait. 1 second, 2 seconds, waits for a second, and then goes. So everything is value over time as far as Maya is concerned. If I wanted to take a longer time to get to the next part, which sure, let's go ahead and do that just to showcase the difference. It waited a second there. Let's go ahead and just do 2 seconds, 150, 180, and I can drag over here, but this is a mistake, and key this, and it would work. It will work in the terms that it will go all the way around, but the mistake would be is it would pop if I was trying to make this a loop. So I'm going to actually do something else. What I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this first frame, and I'm going to paste it on 180. So to copy a keyframe, you move this little gray slider over here to the left, or wherever the key is, and it's always to the gray part's always to the right of that real red line in case it starts getting crowded down there. Right click, copy. Go to frame 180. You can see the number. Right click, paste, paste, and it pasted it there. Now I just set it just to 300, but I'm going to make this loop perfectly, and that's why I did this. I pasted it because I want it to be in the exact same spot at the end there. So if I hit, actually it's going to turn down the thing first. I'm going to stop my animation at 180. You can see we have 180, and this thing should loop perfectly because I copied and pasted the first keyframe to the last keyframe. There you go. And then it says it takes 2 seconds to get to there. 1 second, 1 second, wait, another second, 2 seconds. So you can see it kind of going around. Now, there's nothing real, I mean, again, this is not really the most complicated animation, but we can come in and add to this animation as we go, or take away from this animation. We can do all kinds of stuff. Now, for example, and this is typically how I would work, is I would tend to clean out the animation where I don't need it. And I personally keep things clean as I go. Some people just kind of go for speed. They just animate everything they can, then they go clean it out later. And there's nothing wrong with either way. So you can do it either way. But let's say I want to come in here and start doing secondary movement. Let's say right here, I want this box to jump. We've already blocked in the animation where it runs across the ground. Let's say I want it to jump in the sky. The great thing is, and this is how 3D animation is different from 2D animation, is you kind of work in passes as you go. I mean, granted, you do loose concepts and stuff like that, but it's not exactly the same thing. But in 3D animation, you tend to get things to work in a pass. Then you come and worry about the other things. I like to use like a character walking, for example. First, maybe you just literally translate the character from one point to other point, just to kind of get the speed of how fast they're going from one point to another. Then maybe you focus on actually making the hips move and the legs move. Then you can do another pass where you focus on like maybe the top body, bouncing back and forth. Maybe the character's listening to music, so now suddenly another pass. Maybe the character is bobbing their head up and down. Another pass where the character is whistling. Another pass where the character is blinking their eyes. A different pass for snapping their finger. They're snapping along with the song. You work in passes when you work with 3D. So you can see I did the ground pass here. And this is, you have to kind of plan for this. The next pass, maybe I might do is like, I'll make this jump. So I'll come in here, grab the box, pull it up. And yes, Shift W will work. This should work at least, unless I made a conscious mistake here. And then hit play. And you can see it jumps. All I did was add one keyframe because I didn't need to go back and do the rest. And we can expand upon this. Maybe I wanted to do a little twist in the sky as it jumps. So I'm going to go back to that keyframe. And this is where the arrow pointing to the orange line is great. So I'm going to make it do a little twist. I have no keyframes on rotate yet. So I need to start adding some keyframes before I can actually get this to do anything. So if I add the twist over here, there's no beginning keyframe for it to twist from. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have it twist at this point. And there's nothing wrong. You don't have to go all the way back to the beginning. There's nothing wrong for me starting the twist at 30 and then ending the twist at 60. If that's all I'm going to do, that's perfectly fine. And again, I personally am a fan of the hitting shift on the corresponding tool. The E is the rotate tool. So if I want to keyframe the rotate, it's shift E. So you see, and all I did was went to that frame, keyframe. I need something to start. There's no change there. Just I need something to start. And then I'm going to go to the frame 60. And again, these little arrows that point to the orange lines, i.e. keyframe moves, are great for this. I'm going to go over here, and I don't know. Maybe I'm just kind of dragging on the E key to find out which one it is. Oh, it's rotate, E, Y. And granted, I could WYSIWYG this, but I think I'm going to go ahead and be more precise with this. I'm just going to go ahead and type in -360, and then click off of it, back on. Sometimes that E gets, if you start typing things in there, it gets stuck in there. So I usually click off of it, back on. And I'm going to hit Shift E again. And you can see I've keyed that. Now if I rewind this, hit play, you'll see it did a little spin as it goes. And again, that's because all it has for rotate is keyframes here and here. Now it's not a problem, but if you look at this later on, technically it's still rotated at -360. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, in this case, it's the perfect box, so it's okay. Argue did +360 as well. So just know that, yeah, those values are changed as it goes on, and there's nothing wrong with that. So there we go. We have a little box. You can see it animating around. And, it really comes down to how you set your keys and really being mindful of where you're at on your timeline when you set those keys. So I would advise that, again, if you're new to animation, give this a shot. The next videos we'll probably start talking about graph editors and things like that helps you refine your animation even further. So until next time.